From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Thanks for listening. Eric Atkinson here. Ahead today, K-State's Krishna Jagadish, Allan, Fritz, and Nathan Hein talk about a research project they're conducting now, which is testing the impact of high nighttime temperatures on a wheat stand's ability to produce yields and quality grain. The hope is that the information gathered from this effort will be beneficial to wheat variety development. Also today, K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti is back. He'll talk with Jeff Wickman about a new corn hybrid selection tool that K-State has developed. And later, K-State's Charlie Lee talks about how to positively identify livestock losses to predators, what you livestock owners should look for there. All that plus more next on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
You're listening to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Well, with the uncommonly hot weather for late May, early June beating down on the wheat crop here in Kansas, our first item today links into that very well. K-State researchers are, if you will, turning up the heat on wheat to prove the point that higher nighttime temperatures may be to blame for significant yield and quality losses in the crop. And if they're able to confirm that, that could lead to improvements in wheat breeding that would impact the crop grown here in the state and around the world. What they're doing is physically introducing a high nighttime temperature on wheat under realistic field conditions in order to study the physiological and genetic responses. This is according to the project leader, K-State agronomist Krishna Jagadish. He talks here about the inspiration behind the project, which is now winding down after a 4-week run.
We all know that the climatic variability is happening quite rapidly. And when this climate is changing, temperature is one of the key factors which is driving most of these changes. But some of the recent analysis have shown that it is a high nighttime temperature, that is the warming night temperature, which is more so important and is significantly predicted to induce negative impacts on crops, leading to yield and quality losses.
What they've done here, Krishna and his team have planted wheat inside small tent structures that are equipped with heaters, fans, temperature sensors, and a computer about the size of a credit card. This system allows them to control the amount of heat that the wheat is exposed to each night. Each late evening, they roll down the sides of the tent, they crank up a generator, and they expose the wheat to a temperature that's approximately 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the temperature outside the structure. They're then able to test how the wheat inside the tent reacts to heat stress compared to the wheat planted outside the tent.
As of now, we really don't have a system that can actually capture these responses under the field conditions. So here's a prototype of something that we have developed where we can actually introduce warmer nighttime temperatures and see how the wheat actually responds and if there is a reduction in an yield or quality losses. This is a starting step for a much bigger project. So we have a recently funded NSF EPSCO Track 2 project where we are collaborating with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Arkansas State University. We are trying to look at 2 of the crops, wheat and rice, which are the most sensitive crops to warmer nighttime temperatures. So what we are trying to do here is a prototype of introducing that high night temperature on wheat and trying to study the physiological and the genetic responses. But the overall bigger aim of this project is to build much bigger tents of this kind to actually introduce much greater genetic diversity and also bring in the genetic components for the breeders to be able to have markers to develop our wheat, which is more resilient to high night temperatures into the future.
Krishna says the whole idea is to introduce these warmer nighttime temperatures after flowering. That's basically what happens here in Kansas. That's where there's more warming happening during the grain filling phases. The process of grain formation and development is more sensitive during that period.
This is a prototype project, and this is the very first time this is actually being tested over here. So the whole idea is to introduce warmer nighttime temperatures after flowering, which is basically what happens in Kansas, where there is more warming happening during the grain filling phases. So the whole idea is to introduce this warmer nighttime temperatures when the seeds are actually maturing or during the process of grain development, since they are really sensitive during that period. And this has been going on for about 3 weeks now. So we intend to have this sort of a stress introduced onto the crop for about 4 weeks, and after that the stress will be taken off, and then you actually start to see the impact. In the process of doing all this, we have taken a lot of physiological measurements, and a lot of spikes and the leaf samples have been taken. So all these samples were taken at 4 o'clock in the morning when it was pitch dark. So all this will undergo molecular analysis to be able to come out with some markers that can be utilized for improving our wheat for warming night temperature scenarios.
Now, agronomy graduate researcher Nathan Hein is largely responsible for the mechanics of this particular operation. He shares more about the uniqueness of how this heat stress evaluation works.
One of the most important aspects of the experiment is that we have our generator down over there, which provides power to each single tent. We've wired each heater up through that generator, so when we come out at night, we'll be able to roll down these sidewalls right here, which allows for keeping all the heat within the tent. And we also will shut these top vents as well, which keeps the heat nice inside and cozy in the vent. We'll be able to turn the generator on at that point, which gives us power to our electric heaters inside the tent, and also power to a fan, which keeps the air circulating throughout the tent so we don't get any dead spots or any colder spots. So the heater system is controlled through a computer system. What it allows us to do is maintain a differential between the outside temperature and the inside temperature. Instead of setting a single set point of, say, 26 degrees for the inside, we're able to adjust the inside temperature to either 4 or 6 degrees above the outside temperature, which allows it to follow the same natural curve of the outside temperature and rate as it goes down in the middle of the night, then back up in the morning. So it gives a much more natural heat cycle through it and maintains that differential through it.
And to assure consistent and reliable results, this project operates on a pretty stringent timetable, Nathan says.
At night when we come to shut down the tents, we arrive around 7:15 to get everything started. The process begins with us going through and turning on the computer system and starting to roll down one side of these. Once we have the computer systems all up and running, we'll go to the generator, turn the generator on, which will give power to the fans and the actual heater. And we'll go back in, we'll check to make sure that the heater's running, the system's reading the temperatures correctly, and then we'll fully shut down the other side of the tent to start the heat stress. Our aim is to have that start about 8 p.m. every single night. And then the next morning, we'll meet at 5:45 a.m. and we start by shutting the generator down, and we open up each tent individually, and we'll have every tent open by 6 a.m. So all together, there's about 10 hours of heat stress each night.
The system is developed in such a way that it actually picks up the temperature from outside, so there are 10 sensors. So what it does is there is a differential that is created inside the tent and follows right through the night. So it's not as a set temperature, but it actually changes along with the temperature that's happening outside. So there's no really specific set temperature as such, because that is the problem, because there's never a realistic scenario where there is going to be a realistic one set temperature throughout the whole night anywhere in Kansas or anywhere in the globe. So what's going to happen as far as the predictions are, it's going to change with a certain percentage of degree over the night, right? So that is the beauty of the system here, is where we have sensors outside which actually feeds what the temperature is outside into the sensor which is inside the tents, and then triggers the heater. So then we maintain the differential about 3 or 4 degrees centigrade above than what's happening outside. So this is basically along the lines of the predictions, and then you might be able to see in a moderate time period, let's say towards the 2050s, what is going to happen, something like that. So that's the whole idea. So there's no set temperatures. So we follow a differential temperature to make it more realistic to a real world scenario.
So this is a rather involved and elaborate research undertaking. But what about the information it renders on the impact of nighttime heat on wheat yields and grain quality? What's the value of that when it comes to wheat variety improvement? Well, it's quite significant, according to longtime K-State wheat breeder Allan Fritz.
Yeah, I think this is a really important project because as we look forward in breeding, it's 10 to 12 years from the time we make a cross till we release something, and as we start to deal with these additional stresses, it's really important to have the tools to do that. So this project really sets the stage for us to evaluate materials, understand the genetics behind heat tolerance, and then look at new genetics as it comes along for its ability to handle these higher temperatures. And so I see this as critical information that feeds into breeding as it helps all of the breeders, whether it's the K-State program or private programs or programs around the world, really understand heat tolerance and how to deploy it.
And so how does Allan envision utilizing the information that's garnered from this study?
Well, there's materials that are coming through our breeding program. We've crossed onto things from wild relatives. We have breeding materials from around the world that we've targeted for heat tolerance. One of the opportunities is to be able to ask the question, are we accomplishing what we think we're accomplishing? Are we finding elevated levels of heat tolerance that help us deal with this stress? And so without tools like this, I'm left to kind of be at my own perception of what happens in the field. So this puts some actual data behind that to be able to help us to be able to make sure we're on track for what we want to accomplish.
And he adds that the uniqueness of this study is what sets it apart from previous efforts in this area.
There have been heat tent studies out there before, but they've always been sort of able to capture higher daytime temperatures, but not the higher nighttime temperatures. And it's actually the higher nighttime temperatures that are most damaging to yield. And so we've had these kind of tools to look at that daytime temperature side of it, but this is really a new opportunity to understand in the field setting what happens with higher nighttime temperatures.
K-State wheat breeder Allan Fritz there, along with K-State agronomy researchers Krishna Jagadish and Nathan Hein, on this new K-State study, which hopefully will lead to ways of developing tolerance to high nighttime temperatures in future wheat varieties. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. A Kansas State University crop production and cropping system specialist says that choosing a corn hybrid to plant can be a daunting decision, especially when performance data may not be up to date. Ignacio Ciampitti says the Kansas Corn Commission recently funded a project to collect corn performance trial data along with research and on-farm data conducted in Kansas to develop an online hybrid selection tool.
We started discussing about this tool with Dr. Brian McCornack from entomology. One of our main ideas, and many times that we discuss about access to data, is the timing, right? Because many of our farmers, when they're taking decisions about hybrid selection, they usually take those decisions immediately after harvest. And many times, our information and information that we produce is not immediately available for them. And it takes time for the farmers to look at the data and to process the data. So looking at all these issues, we started discussing with Dr. McCornack on presenting a tool that will provide an online access to all the information that we are collecting in, for example, and will be available for Kansas corn farmers. So with that idea, we say, okay, many times when farmers are selecting for hybrids, it's not an easy task. They have so many different companies, so many different numbers, yields, and locations. And I think that many times that decision is a complex one. So Kansas State, University, we have what we call the hybrid performance trials. These are replicated trials. Replicated, in the sense that we have multiple locations. And we are basically in those trials, they are testing different hybrids. And the goal is locally testing those hybrids and providing immediately that information to the farmers so they can see, okay, these are the hybrids that are performing best in my area. And we have many multiple locations, that they are with all this information. And many times the information is coming in a printed format, in paper-based. And the challenge with that is that when it's reaching our farmers, again, many times our farmers have already taken the decision of buying or investing in a different hybrids. The evaluation of the hybrid can be a great situation to help farmers because, if the farmers will have access to a source of information that is unbiased, coming from a university, and it will have access to a source of information that will basically show how hybrids adapted to that region, close to their farms, are responding. And that will give access to the farmers to decide, should I buy this seed? And trying to decide the cost of the seed, not only based on the yield evaluation, but also considering what is the price of that seed. And I think that was one of the main ideas on trying to think about this, how we can help farmers and agronomists, crop consultants in the idea of deciding the right hybrid selection. In this situation, for example, at least for this growing season, we all have already started the planting, and then many of these locations are coordinating and all that information. Our goal was to make sure that we can get all the information from these replicated trials that they have been conducted by the university for several years and start importing all that information into our tool. And what the tool does is a very simple tool, and the idea of the tool is that the tool will be aggregating the information. It will take in all the information from all the locations, and farmers will have access, and the tool will be available for everyone and all the farmers to view in myfields.info/crop data. And I will encourage everyone to take a look at the tool. It's a very easy, simple. You can compare hybrids. It's very intuitive. It's presented in a way farmers will enter to the tool. They will have a map for the state, and they will have red dots. And they will just click on that specific point, coordinates, see which one is the closest one to their farms. Click on that one and look at what information data is available for that point. They can then click on the link and they will get access to a table. Very simple, easy to digest, with the name of the hybrid, the yields, information of seeding rate, row spacing, fertility, and you will have kind of a ranking. Compared with the county average to the county, and comparing with that county average what was basically the yields for that location. For example, in this case, we are using and showcasing all the information collected for the corn hybrid trials for 2017. And the idea is to basically start, this is one example, of how to use the tool. And the idea is to basically start using all the sources of information, even information that agents, our extension county agents, are collecting. They will have the access to the tool and to put some data into the tool. And then farmers will have access to immediately see, as soon as the data is imported into the tool and approved, the farmers will have access to immediately see the data. And I think that this is an excellent tool with the idea of basically showing to our farmers that we can provide information that is relevant and in a time-fashion approach. That was one of our main issues in the past. For this specific tool, as mentioned before, as the first part of the project, we collaborated with Jane Lipsinger. She was, the agronomist and the main person in charge for the crop performance testing. And she's the one basically helping us gather all the information from these replicated trials. And the idea was to showcase as a first step so we can show to our corn farmers the easy way that the tool can be used, the idea of comparing different crops, and how we can be selecting, hybrids. So we would like to get feedback from our farmers. We would like to keep improving the tool. Our goal in the future is to hopefully to get many different sequences or types of data. We, for example, on my situation, we do on-farm research, working with multiple farmers. We do field research. So much of that data, in many situations, it doesn't finish in the hands of the farmers.
Will this also show then what the conditions were like when the crops were grown? Because that's always another factor. Was it dry? Was it irrigated, non-irrigated?
Yeah, and our goal is basically that a farmer can, if a farmer is, for example, close to a Scandia, the farmer will be able to enter to our research station and will be able to, if the hybrid was compared in the last 3 or 4 years, that's what we are planning to work in the future. Is we would like to get data from the last 3 or 4 or 5 years and give the farmers the ability that they can enter to the tool, and they might be able, if the hybrid, the same hybrid, was used in the last 3 or 4 years, the farmers will be able to see how that hybrid performed in the last 3 or 4 years. So that gives to the farmer the ability not only just to select based on the previous year and based on a yield, maybe in a good environment condition, but also just to look at the last 3 years and see how, for example, good that hybrid was performing in that location. And that will give to the farmer the ability that basically can start selecting and deciding the seed on the cod hybrid utilization based on data and based on real-time data, because our goal is to start uploading data as soon as it's harvested. So immediately when we are harvesting those replicated trials, or even if it's an on-farm research or if it's a field research study, our goal is to process all that information and upload it right online. So almost farmers will have, this is the beauty about the tool, will have access, almost real-time access to the data. And when you are taking decisions, and many times you are taking decisions right after harvesting, so you really need the data to take that decision. And if you can search for an unbiased source of information, and if you can search for data that was coming in the last 2 or 3 weeks, the same area that you're growing your corn, basically you can have a really good type of a platform to take those, kind of a complex and daunting decisions that they usually are, like selecting the right hybrid for the right farm. And I think that this is an excellent project. It's just the first step. I will encourage everyone to look at the website. Again, we appreciate the support from Kansas Corn. This has been an excellent project showcasing what are the things that we can do when we start collaborating and working and thinking, okay, how we can start providing relevant information to our farmers and show that basically extension is there for them. And I think that Kansas Corn was looking into this project and the help of supporting was an excellent platform for us. So again, go to myfields.info, and if you want to see all the 2017 Kansas Corn performance data, you will see all the information in our e-update. Just go to myfields.info and then search for the crop data tool, and you will get access to this amazing source of information. And I think that it will be the hybrid selection. It will be much better after using this tool.
Well, I think, as you said, the tool is only going to improve as you move forward.
Yes. We are looking at, the next coming years to keep populating, because the beauty about this tool is that it's so flexible that we can keep adding data and different type of data. If it's coming from replicated trials or from field research or from on-farm information, that we can start populating yield data from your area. And then for those farmers, working in those areas, having enough and more sufficient data to take those decisions, it will be a decision being based on more kind of a science-driven and based on information that is coming from an unbiased source like a university extension programs.
That's K-State Crop Production and Cropping System Specialist Ignacio Ciampitti with an overview of a new online corn hybrid selection tool. Again, you can access that online tool at www.myfields.info/crop-data. Complete information, including those web links, can be found in the June 8th Agronomy e-update at agronomy.ksu.edu. This is the K-State Radio Network.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. In the agricultural news of the day, the weekly crop progress and condition report for Kansas from the USDA. And for the week ending this past Sunday, the topsoil moisture supplies in the state still 48% short to very short, 51% adequate now, 1% surplus. Subsoil moisture rated 51% short to very short, 49% adequate, and 0% surplus. The state of the winter wheat crop in Kansas, 47% poor to very poor as harvest has commenced, 37% fair, 16% good to excellent. Wheat coloring 80%, that's ahead of the 67% for the 5-year average. Wheat mature is at 29% now, and the harvest is 2% complete. Both of those were equal to the average. Corn condition rated 7% poor to very poor, 33% fair, 60% good to excellent. Corn emergence 96%. Soybean conditions 6% poor to very poor, 38% fair, 56% good to excellent. Planting of beans 89% complete, well ahead of the 67% average, and emergence is at 75%, again well ahead of the 46% average. And the grain sorghum crop is called 3% poor to very poor, 40% fair, 57% good to excellent. Planting of grain sorghum 69% done, ahead of the 51% average, and sorghum headed at 1%. Range and pasture conditions around the state, 24% poor to very poor, 44% fair, and 32% good to excellent. As for the national numbers on corn and soybean conditions now, we turn to the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says the nation's corn crop is nearly all emerged at 94%.
5-year average 92%, last year 93%.
He says corn condition is down very slightly.
But still very good at 77% good to excellent, down a point from last week. 4% very poor to poor, that's up a point. And last year at this time, 67% good to excellent, 8% very poor to poor.
He says there are several areas to watch, including some parts of Texas.
In the southwestern Corn Belt, we've got a little patch of drought there, 12% very poor to poor in Missouri. That's up 4 points from a week ago, and still dealing with some wetness in the East Coast area.
One of the states affected is North Carolina. Rippey says the weather has helped soybean planting progress.
93% planted, 85% is the 5-year average for soybeans on June 10th, 91% planted this time a year ago.
With soy emergence?
83%, 69% is the 5-year average, and 74% last year. So again, with almost no exceptions, we have excellent planting and emergence progress for soybeans.
And with soy condition?
Virtually steady. We did see a 1-point drop in the good to excellent rating from 75 to 74%. No change on the very poor to poor rating at 4%. Much better than last year at this time when we were 66% good to excellent, 6% very poor to poor.
This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Now here's K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk with this week's edition of Milk Lines. Mike?
Today I'd like to talk to our Kansas dairy farmers concerning the forage supplies they may have on their farms. You know, as we look at the way the summer has started off and lack of rain in many areas and severe drought in others, it's probably a good idea for us to take stock of what we actually have for forage supplies on our dairy farms. So the first step in that process is to really inventory what you actually have on hand. Take a look at what you're going to need for the next, say, 12 to 16 months, and then start planning how you're actually going to get the total supply that you need. So here's some things to think about. Number one is we look at the wheat growing out there today. So we get ready to start harvest. We probably notice that the straw is probably pretty short this year. So if you're utilizing straw in your pre-fresh rations or in your dry cow rations, make sure that you have an adequate supply spoken for so that you'll have adequate supplies for your animals. Also, if you use straw as bedding, again, that's another part of the inventory question. How much will you need to get through the next 12 to 16 months? Some of the things you might consider is if we're using it for bedding, there are some other things that we might consider in place of straw. We could use corn stalks, assuming that we get a chance to harvest those this fall and that there are quantities large enough to meet the demands that we actually have on our dairy farms. So if you're feeding straw to your transition pre-fresh dairy cows, make sure you have enough on supply. Make sure that you have adequate supplies available for the next 12 to 16 months for bedding as well, or an alternate source of bedding for your animals. As we look at hay supplies, many of you use hay in your dry cow rations and also in some cases in pre-fresh rations as well as in our lactating diet. So again, inventories here are important. We generally have three main things we need to consider. One would be cool season grasses, particularly for dry cow and heifer diets. Again, those harvests have been fairly short this season, so we may need to consider alternate types of forages for those animals. If you're using warm season grasses in your pre-fresh diets, again, need to take stock of inventories. If we have timely rains throughout the rest of the growing season for warm season grasses, we may have fairly decent harvests, but that would be in question. If you're looking at alfalfa, keep in mind that the second cutting alfalfa will probably be fairly short unless it's under irrigation, as dryland alfalfa has just not really come back very well from the first cutting. So, again, alfalfa supply is what you have on hand, what you need to purchase in the next 12 months or so. Those would be important considerations on our dairy. Now, moving on to corn silage. Most of you have already got your crops planted, although there will be some second crop corn silage acres planted probably here in the next couple of weeks. Again, keep in mind that we may not have 100% crop this year, depending on the timeliness of rains this summer. So, depending on our supply that we actually have on hand now, what we expect to harvest this fall, we may be a little bit short on corn silage for many of our herds. So, some things that you might consider if that's going to be the case. We could use some winter cereal grains and harvest next spring to try to stretch those silage supplies, and that would help us through next summer. You can also look at using some winter cereals for grazing this fall. That might help with heifers and dry cows and relieve some of the pressure we have on corn silage supplies. Some other things to consider yet this summer is we've got a lot of growing season left. Sorghums actually have shorter growing seasons and could be planted for the next couple of months actually in order to get some crop production to carry us through the next year if we're going to be short of forages. Another thing to consider is sorghum sedan grasses. They even have a shorter growing season. And again, maybe we can get one or two cuttings off of those yet this year, and that would extend our forage supplies on our dairy farms. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to consider their current level of forage supplies on the farm and what they will need for inventory to carry them through the next 12 to 16 months.
Thanks, Mike. And this is Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
This Agriculture Today concludes on another aspect of wildlife management, and once more with us is wildlife specialist Charlie Lee of K-State Research and Extension. Well, Charlie, determining what predators might be preying on domestic livestock, and this is something that you contend with and deal with routinely in your occupation.
Yes, unfortunately, we have a lot of predators. Predators kill enough domestic livestock that I get several calls each week. Try to help someone interpret the evidence to make a determination whether a predator killed their animals, and if so, what predator was involved. If we take the right steps early on, we can come up with the correct interpretation of the evidence and figure out what predator is involved if a predation event actually occurred and it was not simply a scavenging event, and then take the proper steps to prevent it from occurring in the future.
You say the starting point is to preserve the scene, if you will.
Yeah, we need to make sure that the evidence still remains until you can do a good job of making the examination. So you're going to have to examine the surroundings, not just the carcass itself, but also the area immediately around that carcass. So in order to do that, we must kind of secure the evidence so that any evidence that's there is not damaged or obscured by other livestock that may be confined in the pasture or in the pen. Because curious animals, including cows and sheep, are going to destroy the evidence fairly quickly. They're curious, they're going to be over and milling about, and then consequently a lot of the evidence is going to be hidden under their hoof prints. Look for tracks. Look for tracks from predators, or look for scat or droppings, fecal material that may be found near the area. Then I like to see that evidence preserved either with good photographs or even covering those tracks or scat material with something like a bucket so that it is preserved and not damaged, and we can do a little better job of examining it if I'm called in to help assist.
And preserving the carcass itself, do you need to take extra measures to do that as well?
Yes, for sure we have a lot of scavengers. Yeah. This time of year, the evidence is going to start to disappear fairly quickly, along with the carcass remains, not only due to heat and normal carcass decomposition, but a lot of scavengers are in the area. We have a lot of turkey vultures that are present currently. They are going to be able to find dead livestock fairly quickly. Consequently, when they're feeding upon dead and decomposing livestock, the evidence is going to get disturbed, and perhaps you're not going to be able to glean any additional information unless you've covered that livestock carcass or the remains with a tarp and then weight that down so that it keeps other scavengers from destroying any tooth marks or evidence that may remain on the scene. If that's not able to be done, then I would encourage folks to photograph or videotape the evidence that's there. It's really helpful if you take numerous pictures, including some sort of a size reference in the image. A pencil or ruler, some known length object is certainly helpful when we're trying to document size. And finally, if you're not comfortable trying to make that determination yourself, then feel free to give me a call. I'm available. That's been part of my job responsibilities for a long time here at Kansas State University, and I'd be glad to come and help investigate the scene and try to determine the correct response.
Expertise here is very helpful, but is there anything that the livestock owner can do to preliminarily assess what might have happened that could help identify if, in fact, a predator was at work here?
Yeah, one of the easiest things to do, and perhaps something that just falls in the good management arena, would be to do a good job of maintaining head counts and locating missing animals. Domestic livestock disappear for a wide variety of reasons. And if you're missing an animal, then the sooner you can find that animal or the carcass or the remains of that animal, the more evidence that can be preserved. And if you don't have a good head count, you're probably not going to know that they are missing until it's too late to preserve the evidence that may remain after a predation attack. So by being a good manager, you know when the animal is missing, you find the carcass or the remains fairly quickly. The next step would be just to look for signs of a struggle. Signs of struggle are good evidence of predation when you've got a lot of trampled vegetation, trails of blood and hair. They're evidence that there's been a struggle between a predator and a prey. I think when you look at the carcass itself, what I consider the single most important factor in determining whether the animal was killed by predators is evidence of bleeding or blood spray. Bleeding can only occur before or very shortly and for a very brief time after death. Oftentimes, the head and neck should be very carefully examined for signs of hemorrhaging or bleeding. That's the area that's most frequently attacked and is often the last part of the carcass that's consumed by predators. But frankly, I don't see very many livestock producers that do a good job of examining that part of the carcass remains.
This is all important because otherwise one can jump to an improper conclusion as to whether a predator actually was responsible for the death of that animal.
I don't know why people automatically assume a predation event occurred first thing, but animals die from numerous causes. Disease is one, poisoning is one, chronic health issues are another concern, snake bite, lightning. All of those causes need to be determined and ruled out before we make the determination that, yes, a predation event occurred.
A thorough assessment is helpful here. Once more, as Charlie says, this is his lot in life, that is to say, to help people out there across Kansas make a determination as to whether a predator has been feeding on their livestock. And you can contact him by way of the local extension agricultural agent or otherwise go online and find his contact information. Charlie, we appreciate the word today on identifying predatory damage to domestic livestock. Charlie Lee is a wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension. With that, our Tuesday edition comes to a close. As always, thanks for being along with us. For Jeff Wickman, Eric Atkinson here, this has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.